Nice to have you here, ladies and gentlemen. In taking the handoff from Dr. Houlihan, without further ado, I'd like to offer a motion directing staff to initiate the development of such a new UCPS student realignment plan. The plan would include the following key provisions, which I'll include in the motion. Number one, in order to maximize efficiencies in the daily transportation of our students, and what I believe is in the best interest of our stakeholders, the centerpiece of this program would be around the concept of neighborhood schools. In other words, all possible efforts would be made so that UCPS students are assigned to the school within the closest proximity to their home. Number two, for those parents that do not feel it's in the best interests of their children to endure another move, a no questions asked grandfathering option would be made available. In other words, if you want your child to stay where they are, they can. Number three, staff will devise a proposal for consideration of the board for a citizens advisory committee to be involved in the development of this student realignment plan from the outset. Membership of this committee to be approved by this board. Four, I support staff's options of retaining outside professionals to forecast student population trends, to develop concrete school capacity figures, and to determine the optimum school assignment in order to ensure the best plan possible. After a favorable vote tonight, hopefully, I would ask the chair to assign further responsibility for this plan, not only to staff, but the appropriate Board of Education committee. And in due course, at the proper time, a final vote by this body. At this time, I would ask for a second to my motion, discussion, and hopefully favorable consideration. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
I'd just like to make an amendment, it's just a technicality, if we could direct the superintendent and not staff. Thanks.
That's fine.
Okay.
I will modify my motion.
Is there a second?
I second.
All those in favor?
Discussion.
Oh,
I just want to ask, just for clarification, I don't know, when we say that they can stay, is that throughout until like 12th grade or options? We're going to have Dr. McKibben or just look at different options?
I think, Ms. Boyd, I think that is, I've purposely been vague in that language so that the Dr. Houlihan and his staff and the parent advisory committee can determine what exactly is the best option for that.
Okay.
any other questions?
Yeah, Gary, I'd like to ask a question as well. On the no questions asked policy to stay at the school, is transportation going to be provided for those students?
Again, I didn't want to get too far into the specifics. I think that should be worked out by Dr. Houlihan and his staff and the advisory committee. I think that's more in the details than I wanted to get at this point. I just wanted to start the ball rolling.
If I could add something.
Sorry, go ahead.
If I could add something to that, back during the days of the Career Center days, all the high schools ran a shuttle where they fed the children into the Career Center 2 times a day. And at that time, it took about 12 minutes max to run that shuttle. So I think we could make transportation efficient by the child would go to their bus school, and then if they wanted to go back to the other one, we'd have a bus going there. That's the way they did it then, and it worked very well.
To go along with Gary's motion, I would just like to add, I would like to caution people that this is the beginning of a process. We're going to research it. We're going to do the right thing. As Dr. Houlihan said, they're going to engage the right people to look at everything. And we have no predetermined outcome of any of this stuff. It's just something that we think we need to look at because of some of the situations with respect to busing inefficiencies and crowding in the older schools. So I just want to caution everybody not to kind of get too excited. There's no timeline yet on it or anything. We're going to try to do this right and take a look at everything.
Dr. Houlihan, you originally said $11,000 that McKibben quoted us. Is that for just a brief overview, or is it going to be more an in-depth report? Because what was do we know, is Mr. Karpinski here? Do we know what the original cost was when we did it last time with Dr. McKibben?
Last time we did it was a truncated report, was $2,035. And then previous to that, we had 2 studies done, one for 17.3 and another for 17,300.
How many years?
That was over since December 2015.
So what I've asked for, Ms. Helms, is I've asked them to come back to us and say, during your every other year option, when you go back and make amendments and adjustments to your prior year report, add that in along with the language that Mr. Sides has mentioned. So it's kind of an amended version. It will be in depth. I do not need, or I don't think the board would want a superficial or an overview. This is more, a little bit deeper.
Okay. Is this already budgeted into what
Yes.
we've already planned? So
Yes.
it's not going to come from anywhere else?
No, it will come from our general operating budget.
Okay. And obviously, we can't forecast what the efficiency rate is going to be with the new proposal until after the new proposal.
That is correct.
Do we know what our current efficiency rating is for transportation?
Mr. Sam Bazin can come up. I'm not sure if we know exactly, but I know that we're able to forecast.
One thing to remember is the efficiency rating works on a lag. So the efficiency rating for this year is technically based on last year's numbers. So we are at 93.95. That was the published number for last year, and that's what we're funded on this year. We've run some models, and right now, if the deadline were today, we would be 93.15, which is slightly lower. But Mr. Watson and his team are looking at consolidating some routes. So we're confident that by the end of the year, we will be very close, if not a little higher than last year's efficiency number.
Thank you for that information.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Basden,
Go ahead.
will consolidating routes not make children later getting to school?
That's a difficult question to answer clearly. Yes, sir, it will. There are balances you try to find between maximizing your efficiency with reducing routes and minimizing the time children are on buses. So it's there's a balance there, and it's difficult to find.
And I want to ask you one more question that was sort of, for me, it glassed over. When I was out talking to people in the community about the bus driver problem, I was shocked to find out that their salary is frozen at the beginning level for 7 years.
Yes, sir. That is our current salary structure, leaves them at their entry-level price for the first 7 years.
What incentive is there for somebody to stay at a job like that they have no chance of any increase for 7 years?
That's a difficult question. I can't, I'm not prepared to answer that. I do know that in cooperation with Human Resources and Finance, our bus driver salary, along with all of our hourly employees, is under review.
And I'll add to that, Mr. Rape. Again, one of the things that came up as part of our Listen and Learning Tour was this idea of human capital development. And I mentioned principals and teachers and retention and recruitment. Bus drivers fall right in there, as do maintenance workers, as do construction, as do this and that and that. And I think this board and our administration, one of our goals is, as we look at budgeting for next year, what is going to be our priority? in terms of where we want to put additional dollars to do something like increase our bus driver compensation. Is that something that this board collectively would want to do? There are some things internally that we can do as well to help keep bus drivers on the job. All of these things we're going to be glad to talk further with the board about.
So what?
Go ahead.
What is the cutoff date for the next efficiency rating? How longer do we have?
We're judged on how many buses we have running for a 90-day period. So we have now through effectively the semester. January is, that beginning of January is a good round time. Thank you.
I have a question, and this goes out to all board members, and I'd like everyone to respond. My question is, if we get our report back from Dr. McKibben and his findings and his recommendations are absolutely nothing like the proposal, I would like to know where each board member stands. Are we going to listen to Dr. McKibben and his forecasting and what he's recommending, or where are you, every board member, thinking where you want to go? Are you going to follow his direction and what his recommendations are, or are you planning to pick and choose?
I think that we're going to have to ask Dr. McKibben some questions. There's a lot of growth going on in certain pockets of the county, and in the past, he's always indicated that he's taken into account those growths in his numbers. He did not take into account charter schools last year, and that was part of the problem with our decline in enrollment last year. I think that it has to be some involvement to know what the parameters that he's being given and what he's being told by the municipalities about growth in their area. So I don't know if we can answer that until we know what is going into what he's working on.
Well, I think we can say, I'm going to listen to Dr. McKibben. Yes, we're going to take it under advisement, but I think we should go in another route. I think that's.
I would like to address that. In the last redistricting, the board didn't listen to Dr. McKibben then.
He requested that we move 7,000, we moved 3. No, we did not follow his recommendations to the letter.
Well, that's not my understanding. And I think that's what led to the busing inefficiency that has cost us so much, the $2.5 million between the 900,000 and fuel cutbacks and extra time and miles on the road.
I'm just going to reiterate the motion and to answer your question. I think we have to allow staff to give us input. We have to allow Dr. Houlihan and his staff to give us their advice on what works for Union County Public Schools. I believe, which was very different 3 years ago, we have to have a citizens advisory committee that covers all 6 clusters, and we have to allow the parents in this decision. And finally, we absolutely do have to listen to Dr. McKibben. And so when you take all of those parts and put them together, then I would be able to make my decision on a vote in the future.
I agree with Melissa on that. I'd like to add too that we need to make sure we have good capacity numbers for the schools, and that we feel comfortable with the capacity numbers for each of the schools, so that we know Dr. McKibben really can't tell us a lot unless we know what our capacities are in each of our schools and what they can handle. And I think that's something that we've been working toward, but I think it's something that we need to continue to determine the final things. But I agree with what Melissa just said.
And in facilities, over the summer, in the last few months, we have been working with the facility staff to give us updated capacities. We started, I believe we started with the middle schools, and we got those numbers, and then the following month we were given capacity information for our high schools. And the reason we did that in facilities is because our overcrowding was in the middle schools. So that was a logical place to start. And then we worked into the remaining high schools that weren't on the bond. And at our last facilities meeting, we have 30 elementary schools. Only one is on the bond. So we had the answer to that one. So we were able to break that in half, and we've received 15 of the elementary schools, and then we're ready to receive the other half. And so we've been making that progress on working on our capacity. So as soon as we form, now that everyone has been sworn in tonight, we'll be able to immediately put together our facilities committee. And Leslie and I have spoken to Dr. Houlihan and committed that we will work very hard to have a facilities meeting before the 21st.
I will, since it's my motion, I guess it's only appropriate that I answer the question as well. I think we all of us may have slightly different decision-making processes that we use or will use on this board. And not to say there's a right one or a wrong one, but that's why we have a staff, is to provide information from the professionals, to look at outside vendors for their professional opinion. But personally, I believe ultimately the decision rests with the 9 of us. We were elected by the people of this county, and you have a perfect right to use your own set of values or information, how you make the decisions, but ultimately it's our decision. So if I think, based on the information I receive from all sources, that I feel something needs to be tweaked, then I'll propose it. If the other 8 or how many others don't feel the same way, then that's the way it works.
Okay, any more questions or comments? Okay, well, we have a motion on the floor. All of those in favor of the motion as amended to that we would be directing the superintendent and not staff. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Okay, the motion passes.